Big thanks to Scaly, Mama Please, Virtual Fever, Cosmatic, Halo Clay, Headtrap, E. Adamus, Peasel Polsky, Theory Periastron, Below Flames, Lucky Boy, Kelman Foz, SSS Graded, and Notice Astra, and all of the amazing people you see on screen for supporting me on Patreon. Patreon.com/NitroLord. A very good website. What if I told you that there once existed a massive organization of people, numbering over 300,000 at one point, who fought in wars together, fostered lifelong friendships with each other, and made a name for themselves as one of the most well-known and fearsome organizations on Roblox, only for it to all come tumbling down in one single second? Such is the story of Lortex Security, a group which was started largely as a bit by its infamous founder, but very quickly grew to be much more than that. Veteran Roblox players who paid any attention to the clans and guilds side of Roblox back in the day probably know the name Lortex very well. But if you joined Roblox in the past half a decade, it probably doesn't ring any bells to you, which is kind of surreal to think about, because just 5 years ago, it was pretty much impossible to not run into advertisements and references to this organization somewhere on Roblox. Now, masked under a "this group has been locked" screen, the Lortex Security name lives on only in the memories of those who were there to experience it. One of whom was me. Kind of. I don't remember exactly how, but back when I was in middle school, which would have been around 2016 or 2017, I remember stumbling across a certain Roblox game. It was an obstacle course with a singular badge attached to it, and it said that if you got this badge, it would entitle you to a free promotion in the group Lortex Security. I was new to Roblox at the time and was pretty bad at obbies, so it took a lot of work, but eventually, I did indeed make it to the end, and obtain the badge. Once I did, I joined the group, excitedly posted on the group wall that I'd gotten the badge, and then never checked back in on it again. So my experience with Lortex Security was pretty brief, but for whatever reason, it did stick in my head for a while after. I remember being especially impressed with the group's leader, who called himself the Warden and wore this at the time intimidating looking outfit, which I'm pretty sure is the reason why the Dominus Infernus is one of my favorite hats to this day. So I went to check back in on the group and found it a locked up ghost town. And I wanted to know what happened to it. So I went down a rabbit hole, as I often do. A very lengthy rabbit hole. All the way back to 2012, in fact. This video is the result of that. Join me as I uncover the long, turbulent, and storied history of Lortex Security, and the truth behind the disappearance of Roblox's largest army. Our story begins with a Roblox user known as RebReb, who joined the platform in 2007, just 1 year after it launched to the public. RebReb, like most people who joined Roblox at the time, was a kid who was interested in learning how to develop games. Very soon after joining Roblox, he had already purchased Builders Club, begun to learn scripting, and created a good amount of original games. And over the course of his time on Roblox, these games began to accumulate a lot of visits. Hit games such as Own a Box and Mine Away, It's Backo, and Make a Obstacle Course and Play It, Send Friend Requests yeah, pickings were pretty slim back then, accumulated RebReb a total of just under 500,000 visits by the beginning of 2009. And RebReb seemed to be on the course to becoming a very prolific and creative Roblox developer. But sadly, all good things must come to an end. Likely sometime around mid-2010, RebReb's account was permanently terminated off Roblox. This taught him a very hard lesson about the inevitable impermanence of creative fame. No matter how much time, effort, or talent you put into your creative work, it cannot and will not last forever. When faced with this reality, one can do one of two things. Either realize that the beauty of creativity isn't in how long it lasts, but in what it means to you and others while it is around, or reestablish your platform with the express goal of getting as much fame as possible as quickly as possible by any means necessary before it all comes to an end again. Guess which one RebReb picked.
Those
Those games were all published within a year of each other, and none of them are original ideas. That's right, our friend RebReb became an infamous game stealer, similar to Jared Valdez 4. He would use illegal tactics to steal other people's games and publish them with extremely clickbaity titles and thumbnails under a slew of alternate accounts, and once these games dried up in visits, he would steal other games to replace them with. Doxita123, RebReb97, RebReb9797, Shattered Destroyer, Pablo and Juan, Lemon Power 9, MeChad V, and many more, all RebReb's puppet accounts with the sole purpose of churning out as much place visits and revenue as possible. He copied tycoons, he copied RPGs, he copied obbies, even roller coaster games weren't safe from his wrath. But he still wanted more. It's true that he had a lot of hit games now, but despite this, he still wasn't exactly famous. All of these games were spread across sock puppet accounts and clickbaity as heck, so mostly only really young kids who didn't really care who their developer was played them. Most players that did know of him off the top of their heads were haters or victims of his, frustrated with how he would keep stealing their games. To achieve the cult of personality that he truly desired, he would need to create, well, a cult of personality. A group of people that actually respected him as a leader. And what better way to do that than doing what had already worked for him dozens of times before? Copy someone else. In 2010, user JustGoAway1 founded a clan called Lortex Security. Clans, for those of you who don't know, are Roblox groups who act as a mock military, with their members role-playing as soldiers and fighting wars against other clans. It was very successful in its time, racking up over 80,000 members by 2012, and being declared the most active group on Roblox at that year's Roblox Game Conference. But with great success comes copycats, and RebReb wanted a piece of that action. So, on August 8th, 2012, he created Lortex Security, a blatant and unapologetic ripoff of Vortex Security. Now, unlike JustGoAway1, RebReb's goal with Lortex Security was never to fight in mock wars and train soldiers. No, RebReb was a grifter through and through, and in the time he owned Lortex Security, despite promises that he was going to once the group hit a certain amount of members, he never hosted a single combat training. Instead, he fed members into the group by promising free VIP in many of his clickbait copied games as a reward for joining, and once he had a substantial amount of members in the group, he began using its shout to advertise his new games to his now thousands of loyal followers. This went on for a good few months, pushing Lortex Security's member count to over 14,000, until Roblox began to catch on to the fact that RebReb was spamming the front page with copied games, and one by one, all of his alternate accounts were quickly terminated, forcing RebReb out of the game development scene for good. The next few weeks were an uncertain time for Lortex Security. Upon being terminated, RebReb passed the group to a user called OpticFeed, and from him, it rapidly switched hands, with no one owner holding onto it for more than a week or two. No one seemed to be ready to take on the responsibility of managing over 13,000 quote-unquote soldiers that had never even seen a day of combat training before. It was unclear whether a stable leader would ever step into the picture, or if Lortex Security was doomed to languish in obscurity forevermore. But around November of 2012, a stable leader would indeed step into the scene. It's time I introduce you to one of the most important figures in Lortex Security history, Shooting Raw 1. As a former high rank in Legendary Warlords and the former owner of Roblox Military Services, among many other positions, Shooting Raw 1 was no stranger to clan leadership by the time he took hold of Lortex Security. His experience was exactly what LS needed to get whipped into shape, and under him, it began to take its first steps in its journey of growth as an actual functional sword-fighting clan. Upon taking ownership of the group, Shooting immediately drafted up a 2,500 word guide, detailing exactly how LS would be run from then on. He created a myriad of new systems, protocols, and rules all within his first few days of ownership, as well as a quote, Constitution of the Fatherland, and some divisions, smaller groups bearing the Lortex name used for special purposes. He created the Supreme Court for big arguments and negotiations, the Training Academy for teaching high ranks how to conduct trainings, the Military Division for special operations conducted by the best soldiers LS had to offer, and Lortex Security the Family, a group whose intended function location I couldn't even hazard a guess at. Training of new and old members progressed incredibly quickly, and by late November, just a few weeks after Shooting came into power, LS had already fought and defeated 3 other clans: Roforce, Nightfall Clan, and Team Domino. Shooting then went on to create a few games for the group, namely the main HQ and Outpost Demure, which acted as territory that could be raided by other clans, the Supreme Court building to bolster the functionality of the Supreme Court group, and Training Area Exos, a bespoke area for training LS's soldiers. On December 2nd, Shooting led LS into battle in its first ever multi-clan war. It fought alongside Raven Empire against the Widge Alliance, the Robloxian army, and the very clan it was made to spite, Lortex Security. In the end, LS did end up losing in a final battle against the Robloxian army, but it was a very close match. The final score was 73 TRA and 61 LS. But this loss would be redeemed just a month later when LS participated in Ro War 5, one of the biggest wars in Roblox history to date, involving several dozens of clans separated into 2 different alliances. LS fought on the side of the Grand Super Clan Coalition, which successfully took down PSP John 1's United Nations Alliance in early January of 2013. And while he was leading LS in this war, Shooting Raw 1 was still creating new stuff for the group, including a new multi-purpose game called Rally Point and new lore for the group, establishing it as a space-themed organization hailing from the mysterious ocean of Listeria. It wasn't very fleshed out lore, and it would end up changing over the years, but the name Listeria would go on to stick as Lortex Security's homeland. Shooting Raw 1 was a great leader, and by most accounts, really seemed to love Lortex Security and be loved by LS's members. However, on January 5th, 2013, just one day after the Grand Superclan Coalition's victory in Ro War 5, he was convinced to sell the group, and sadly had to say goodbye to it, thus heralding in a new leader. Dark God. Like Shooting Raw 1, Dark God was no stranger to clan leadership. He was the leader of Team Arctic, second in command of the Imperium Empire, and co-commander of the Vactovian Arctic Division. He worked hard to keep the same standards that Shooting Raw 1 had for LS. Like him, he was harsh but fair, and very prolific. He upgraded Shooting's headquarters, and created a new state-of-the-art recruitment center, meeting center, training facility, and a place for sword fighting tournaments. In April of 2013, he created LS's first ever YouTube channel, and used it over the following few months to post video announcements for the clan. They may look kinda goofy nowadays, but back in 2013, they made LS look very professional, and they were very helpful for archival purposes too. From them, we know that on April 14th, 2013, LS went to war alongside the X-101st Legion main army against Iron Force, and that on May 5th, they went to war against Heavy Assault Unit and won within a week. They also warred against Royal Blood, which went into lockdown before a winner could be decided, and then they allied with Scorpion government to go to war against Rebel Squad, which I couldn't really find any further info about. All of this activity and improvement caused LS to climb to over 1.5 times the member count it had at the end of Shooting Raw 1's term, making it the 14th largest clan on Roblox at 45,000 members. LS was truly a super clan now, and under Dark God's leadership, it was a force to be reckoned with. Dark God had one fatal flaw though: his relationship with the user iBurning. That's right, Dark God was an online dater, the worst thing you could possibly be called in 2013 Roblox. According to one prolific LS member that I managed to interview called Marinist, quote, "She was the quote-unquote Empress of LS, and nobody had really liked her. She held the second highest rank, and there was so much conflict and drama about that." According to another veteran LS member, Sios, the relationship impacted his ability to lead so much that on July 4th, 2013, he stepped down, selling the group back to Shooting Raw 1. Shooting Raw 1 co-led the group with his friend Toltem for a few months more, and like before, he did his best to improve the group as much as possible. He created a new, more modern-looking headquarters for LS, featuring lots of different elevations of ground and hideout spots to make raids more interesting. He also had a new training facility commissioned, and attempted to resurrect the military division, whose old group had fallen dormant and inactive by this time. But aside from this, nothing of much note happened until November 2nd, 2013, when Shooting was approached with another offer to sell LS, this time by the user Mr. Chappie. Mr. Chappie was the leader of the clan Iron Force at the time, and part of his deal with shooting involved trading Iron Force for LS. Chappie did his best to lead LS, and he did manage to get them into one notable war alongside Black Wolf Empire, a totally cool clan that's never posted anything problematic or hilarious in any way, against Reign of Chaos and Frost Clan. He also created two new divisions, the Dauntless Division, which functioned pretty similar to Shooting Raw 1's military division, and the Erudites Division, which was pretty much just for all the high ranks of LS. But just around a month into his ownership, he had a falling out with his co-leader Theorizing. This caused him to sell the group to another new leader, Fertility, also known as Impresario. Chappie would later admit that he regretted trading off Iron Force for LS since he put so much work into Iron Force, and really only did the trade because of LS's member count of around 50,000. Unfortunately, Fertility would prove to be a pretty hands-off leader, as the only really notable thing he ever did was get LS into a war against Frost Clan, which they lost 20-0. LS coasted on its high member count with Fertility at the helm for a while, until June of 2014, when Fertility finally decided to jump ship and sell off the group to a user called Just Defiable. According to Sios, this was the moment when LS really started to go downhill. Justifiable, unlike Dark God, Shooting, and Chappie, wasn't exactly known for being a great clan leader. He'd owned one small clan before called the King's Reserves that didn't do too great, and he'd owned a larger clan called Urban Spetsnaz, but only for a few months. Then he switched to United Assassins Global and Galvanic Legion, which he, again, only owned for a few months before owning LS. Apparently, he was known to be a generally shady guy and a scammer. He allegedly scammed dozens of people out of groups and limiteds. Justifiable did a few notable things with LS, such as posting a new codex and a training guide, and creating the group Lortex Security Immortals, which was another shot at a group meant exclusively for the best LS soldiers. But according to Sios, despite these efforts, the group lost a lot of its activity under him. Only 8 to 16 people would usually show up to trainings, which isn't a lot in terms of SuperClan standards, and eventually, in September of 2014, Justifiable got into a tight financial position and decided to sell the group off to another new owner called Functionized. Under Functionized, LS's activity problem would only continue to grow. Sios described Functionized as, quote, more of an artist who made people temporarily lead LS so he could sell it rather than a leader. He hardly did anything with the group other than having people spruce it up and give it some new content to make it seem appealing to potential buyers. Specifically, according to Marinist, he republished some games that were built by LS developers during Justifiable's era, those being the Rally Center, Advancement Course, Meeting Center, Holographic Training Facility, and Outpost Inspirium. He also created a second YouTube channel for LS and published under it an intro that he had made, declaring a new era of LS and showcasing all their cool new places. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the idea that he was just leading LS in order to profit off it by selling it to someone else isn't confirmed, only alleged. But if that was truly his end goal, then he very much succeeded. Because now, dear viewer, we've finally arrived at the era of Wardency. Those who've been paying attention will remember that one of the main things I remember from my time in Lortex Security was an intimidating group leader who called himself the Warden. This was Wardency, and he actually agreed to interview with me for this video, so a good portion of the information I have about his leadership actually comes directly from the Warden himself. But I'd take what he says with a grain of salt, because as it turns out, our new friend Marinist was actually still a pretty high rank when Wardency was in charge, and he had some choice words to say about the man, which I'll get to later. Wardency, or as he went by in the early 2010s, Flavored, was an early Roblox limited trader. By making trade deals with fellow Robloxians for their high-valued limiteds, he gained a lot of Robux worth of wealth from 2012 to 2015. Though, he was also infamous for allegedly scamming people, as seen in this old forum thread where someone asks if he scams and receives responses like, is the sky blue? Is the sun orange? And is water wet? To which the answers are obviously yes, sometimes, and holy heck, for the love of God, please don't start up that debate again. Regardless of the legitimacy of how he got his wealth, though, the dude was mega rich, and the way he decided to spend his wealth was by buying up superclans for insane amounts of money. He bought Velocity Nation, he bought Ice Legion, he bought Sky Clan, but for whatever reason, Lortex Security was the one he decided to stick with for the long run. On February 8th, 2015, he purchased the group for a total of around 560,000 Robux worth of limiteds, including Golden Ollie and Sword Cane, which alone are worth a total of around 2 million Robux today. He knew that the clan hadn't been at its prime in terms of activity in a while, and so he decided to have LS's developers give it a complete and total makeover. The biggest change he made was giving the clan a whole new fighting style. See, up until Wardency's ownership, LS had been a sword-fighting only clan. The only weapons they would use in combat would be swords, and while the intricacies of Roblox sword fighting are greater than one might think, by 2015, the sword had become a kind of limited weapon compared to what could be pulled off with scripting. Wardency saw the sword as too old school, and one of the main reasons why activity in LS was down. So, he transitioned LS to a sword-fighting and gunfighting clan, and later, gunfighting only. The next order of business was completely reworking how the group would function as an army. On February 9th, just a day after taking ownership of LS, Wardency posted several very important documents on the forums. New enlistment requirements, which were rules for joining the group, a raiding and defense system, which detailed how to raid and defend bases, a training implementation, which detailed how to run trainings, a ranking system, which described the function of each rank in the group, and an alliance system, which described how to become allies with LS. Over the following few months, these systems would be reworked several times over, and various new Lortex-related games would be published on Wardency's account. Mostly raidable forts, like the Lysterian Communications Tower, the Imperial Palace of Lysteria, and Fort Everest, and training facilities like Space Training Facility Apello, Space Gun Training Pit Grounds, Initiation Course, and Arena. Some of these games would later be moved under the Lortex Security group itself once group building became a Roblox feature. The Communications Tower became an especially beloved base, becoming reputed as one of the best clan bases on Roblox and seeing many wars and raids. Wardency also made several attempts to create some solid lore for the group, but it was always fluctuating and no one aspect really stuck for too long. You might have noticed that this video hasn't been focused nearly as much on lore as some of my other group-based videos have, and that's because the only thread that lasted throughout pretty much all of this group's history was that LS was a futuristic army from the land of Lysteria. All this new development was enough to cause a much-needed spike in activity, and with this newfound activity came new wars to fight in. In late July of 2015, LS warred against one of the biggest clans on Roblox, the First Encounter Assault Recon, aka Fear, and lost 25-1. In early August, they experienced several raids as part of a quote-unquote raid race between the Widge Alliance and the Robloxian army to see who could win 40 raids against different clans first. And in early January of 2016, a large-scale war occurred between two superclan alliances, Red 4 and Blue 4. LS was part of Blue 4, and Red 4 took the victory on January 20th. They may not have been winning many wars, but on the surface, morale seemed high, and activity had definitely improved since the era of Functionized. They were a little confused, but they had the spirit. Perhaps the biggest reason for this was the fact that much of LS's new membership consisted of untrained young kids. Okay, the next line in the script was originally meant to be, in mid-2015, Wardency created the group Royal Entertainment and began publishing several tycoon games under it, which absolutely blew up, gaining millions of visits. I have found out that that was not actually the case. He actually intentionally got its previous owner, who happened to be his friend Functionized, the person who owned Lortex Security before him. He got him intentionally banned, and then he claimed the group from him, and then just, like, squatted on it and reaped all the profits from it for the rest of time. So, yeah. Great guy. Great owner. Wardency took advantage of this success by offering free VIP in these games to those who joined Lortex Security, ironically employing the exact tactic that Lortex's original founder RebReb did to gain members. And, like before, it worked like a charm. By the end of 2015, LS was up to 81,000 members, over 15,000 more than it had when he first acquired it. Wardency had now owned LS for just around a year, making him the longest running owner it had ever had, and he wouldn't be abandoning it anytime soon. In January of 2016, he created his own brand new divisions for the group. There were 3 that ever saw any use. The Oathsworn division was the Warden's closest guard, in charge of protecting him and being the highest enforcers of his orders. The Airborne Assault division was the pilots of Lortex Security, in charge of tactical air operations and stealthy troop transport. Members had to pass actual flight exams to get in. The Officer Operations Division was a required 5-stage academy for teaching high ranks how to be high ranks. Wardency would also create 2 additional divisions over the course of 2016. The Boarding Brigade, which would have been LS's naval division, and the Heroic Healers, which would have been their medical division. But these were never made official. 2016 had no shortage of wars either. There was a war in early April against a small clan called Void that went into hibernation before the war could finish, and it was quickly followed by the infamous War of the Rap, another large-scale war where numerous clans joined forces in an alliance for and an alliance against this rap.
UAF, oh yeah, it's the group to be in. You can't run, you can't hide, we'll hunt you down and you'll be found. So why don't you join UAF today so you don't have to face our soldiers that are better than okay.
Failing to see the rap as the flawless masterpiece of music and literature that it was, LS unwisely joined the anti-rap side, which lost 25-0. They then warred against Frost Clan in early May, and lost 6-0 after just one day of fighting. Now, let's take a pause here and summarize the exact state that LS was in at this point in time. They were fighting a good amount of wars, but not really winning any of them. They were gaining a good amount of members, but those came mostly from untrained kids interested in Wardency's Tycoon games. They had their fighting style completely changed out of nowhere, which, while modernizing it, left all of LS's veteran fighters who were used to sword fighting confused and feeling ignored. Considering all of this, it's no wonder why LS's reputation at this point began to take a pretty big downturn. And despite that initial activity spike in 2015, activity began to slow down once again very soon afterward. In fact, LS wasn't involved in many, if any, events of note in the clan roleplay world until 2019. And the single most key factor to this downfall that many who noticed it would point out was the very person that started this modernization in the first place: the Warden. This is where I'll recount what Marinist, who was at this point one of LS's leading developers, had to say about his time working with Wardency. I'm pretty sure Wardency will actually see this video since I interviewed him at all, and if you are watching this Wardency, I just want to stress to you, all of this is coming from Marinist, not me. I'm not trying to start any beef with you. If you have a problem with what Marinist said, take it up with him. The biggest thing that Marinist wanted to stress to me was that Wardency had a god complex. He saw himself as the sole savior of LS, having lifted it from having no logo, description, or activity into a modern-looking superclan single-handedly, while completely ignoring the work that his developers did to get it there, and at times, actively making it harder for them to do said work. These are some direct quotes from Marinist. Note that Sam is Wardency's real name, and that fact is pretty public knowledge. I was what you consider a shadow leader, the person who runs the clan but doesn't own the clan. Wardency genuinely believed that clans were a waste of time, money, and resources and wanted nothing to do with LS. He got famous and rich by scamming and stealing, and all of his friends the same, and he was not afraid to admit it or discuss it. As I previously said, Sam wanted absolutely nothing to do with LS, but was not willing to part ways with it. My entire time I was a commander, he was largely inactive, maybe going to 5 events. For the longest time, Sam refused to give anyone admin but him at Communications Tower. You obviously need admin in any base, and he never attended a defense. It took months for him to budge, and he only gave me admin, none of the other high ranks. Despite us developers being the sole reason for all the development success in LS from 2016 to 2019, and the scripters of all the tech, Sam refused to give anyone developer permissions to update/upload the tech that we created in the first place, because he was afraid we would throw inappropriate content in the games, like or something to get him banned, and then claim the group. You used to be able to claim groups when the owner gets banned, but in all my years of clanning, I'd never heard of anyone doing this or anyone being afraid of something like this. As such, the system we had was to send Sam place files for him to download and upload to the group himself. It would take weeks for this to happen if we needed one update done, not because he was busy, but because he knew we had no other option. No matter how many times I would follow up with him in DMs, he would never help us. I briefly resigned from LS due to an incident where I had specifically asked him for one update for weeks, and he just straight out refused. He was well into his 20s during this time, and as a full-grown adult, you wouldn't believe the way he would act. You would not believe the way he contributed to the demise of LS and would actively work against me just out of spite. Nobody, not me or any other developer, got paid for any of our work, even though Sam had 200k plus in group funds and millions of Robux in Rap/Robux revenue. He funded zero development. He gave nothing to us but headaches. Now, it's important to keep in mind, this is just one guy talking. It could all be a lie. But considering his experience and the fact that it's been 5+ years at this point, I can't really see much of a reason he'd have for lying. And if he's telling the truth, shocker, honestly, that a guy who gave himself a LARPy-ass title like the Warden, flexed his millions of Robux worth of Roblox wealth constantly, had future billionaire in his Roblox description for a while, and wrote supervillain-esque paragraphs like, "My promise, I will one day obtain ownership of SCR one way or another. I will then proceed to exile every single last one of them one by one, until my hands can no longer do it. I will then rest, and continue until there is not a soul left in SCR. I will then proceed to delete every single place/uniform/piece of writing that SCR has on this site. Change the description to flavored sends his regards. PM Sling to content delete the name. Set the damn thing to request to join and leave it. Wipe it from existence as if it never happened. Because revenge can be so sweet." Unironically and frequently would have a god complex. How could anyone have seen that coming? For better or for worse, the Warden was there to stay. LS was his group, and he had more than enough wealth to make any reasonable purchase offers anyone could make nothing more than a drop in the bucket to him. It seemed that the only way anyone was gonna get Lortex Security away from him was by prying it from his cold, dead hands. And believe it or not, that opportunity would come sooner than anyone thought. Because on April 25th, 2019, while Wardency was looking over the final plans for a big new update to Lortex Security and all of its games, his Roblox account was suddenly and unexpectedly terminated. According to him, shortly before the termination, he'd paid one of his Tycoon developers 200,000 Robux in group funds. This developer then sold this Robux for real money on the black market. Roblox terminated Wardency for his involvement in the matter, stating in his appeal, "You choose who you work with." You know, it's almost poetic in a way. Lortex Security started because of a shady guy with more game development success than he deserved, who used that success to manipulate his group member count and eventually got terminated because of it. And it ended because of another guy who, from what I've heard from his peers, was the exact same way. When Wardency got terminated, his Royal Entertainment group was immediately locked, but LS lived on as a zombie group for a few years afterward, rotting away with a dead leader at the helm and no admin permissions for anyone but him. It continued to gain residual members from Wardency's Tycoon games, until, on December 31st, 2023, it was officially locked at over 300,000 members. Sam had truly wanted LS to die with him more than anything else, and he got his wish. After Wardency was terminated, one of his best friends and former high rank of LS, Apolyoff, started a revival group called Lortex Armed Forces. He tried leading it as another gun clan for a few months with little to no success, and eventually decided to sell the group to none other than Marinist. Marinist turned the group back into a sword-fighting clan for the first time in years, and finally unrestricted by any higher-ups, was able to develop several unique and advanced bases and games for the clan. Activity rose, and LAF began dominating the sword-fighting scene. At the end of 2019, their coalition won one of the last ever large-scale superclan wars, Row War 2020, and they also took part in the Delta Regiment's Autumnal Crusade and raided a clan called VSA in a 50v50. Then, one day, Marinus decided to just let the clan go. He didn't want to allow it to die with him like Wardency did. After that, it got passed around to several different owners, none of whom did much with it, and by this point, it's been bought out so many times that it doesn't really function as a clan anymore, and is only related to Lortex by name. None of the games work anymore, no one's really active in it, it's pretty much dead. Thus ends the tale of Lortex Security, a group that had an incredible amount of potential to be something great and create lasting good memories for everyone in it, but was capsized by the greed of its own leaders. Which isn't to say it didn't create any good memories for people. One of the questions I asked the veterans who I interviewed for this video was what their fondest memories of their time in LS were. Marinus, despite feeling restricted by Wardency's stubbornness, loved working with developers Toast and Exalted Architect to create some of the best technology and building that existed for any clan on Roblox at the time, and recruiting actual clanners to balance out the Tycoon kids and boost activity. Apollyoff remembered fondly the little bits of made-up drama and quote-unquote rebellion groups that would spring up from time to time. Even Wardency was able to cite examples of some fond memories he had, one being when soldiers from the Vactovian Empire used Lortex bases to train for a bit, and the other when Lortex Security actually pulled ahead of the member count of its namesake, Vortex Security. Unfortunately, for those who only got to experience the rule of Wardency, which was the majority of the clan, it seems the good memories are far outweighed by the bad ones. Many would like to forget their time in LS altogether, and many more already have. But those who were there in Lortex Security's first few years of life know that its legacy runs deep. And in my opinion at least, no matter its faults, it doesn't deserve to be forgotten. I've been Nitro Lord, and I'll see you all next time.